Welcome back. This is Dr. Patrick Woke, and we are at Heart of the Hustle here in Houston, Texas. And today we are very lucky to have Josep here, CEO of Common Bond, and I call it PRC, or Positive Recovery Centers.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to tell you a little bit about, we're very lucky to have you here, George, and the fact that, you're just recently awarded the Houston Business Journal's Most Admired CEO of the Year. That must be a great acolyte, as well as I heard from you as well as Counselor of the Year. And I think that also goes along with your PRC business. But it's really amazing to have you here at the Heart of the Hustle today. And we really want to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about your businesses, what you're going on. I'm sure almost everyone out there knows Common Bond, but they may not know your other businesses.
Yes.
And I would love to hear about that. And then a little bit about what you're looking forward to the next couple of years.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for being here and doing this for the public and for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. I have two passionate projects. One is Positive Recovery Centers. It's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center that has inpatient, outpatient, detox, sober living. We're right across the street from, one of the facilities is right across the street here from St. Thomas. We had been there originally since 1994. Mm-hmm. The first company was called The Right Step. I sold it in 2012 and had a 4.5-year hiatus on my non-compete. Mm. And then once that was over, we restarted Positive Recovery Center and basically took back some of the facilities that were managed by The Right Step, because I was still the landlord. And then we have Common Bond, which is a bakery, bistro, brasserie. It's amazing feel of Europe, very multinational. You could be in the bistro and hear so many different languages being spoken. I just love the name Common Bond is the bringing of people over the joy of food. And it originally opened almost 7 years ago by a chef from Houston who went to New York and trained, and then went to Europe and trained, and had a vision to bring this back to Houston. And so when he opened it, he didn't have some of the business savvy that a chef sometimes always has, and the kitchen was too small, but he had such great following, lines out the door. And so he sought me out through a mutual friend, and I didn't plan to be in the bakery business, but sometimes things happen for a reason, and I felt a calling to it, and so I bought it, and obviously with the pandemic, we were right in the middle of our growth strategy. I like to grow things. I like to see employees move up, get promoted, feel good about their job, take ownership. So we're right in the middle of that expansion, and we've gone from basically 1 restaurant to 7, and there's 3 more that are in construction as we speak. And the staff has done an amazing job through the pandemic. The same thing for Positive Recovery Centers. We followed all the guidelines. We've tried to do everything as best we can to keep people safe. And now future is just growth. I think that when you have a good service, it's a disservice to not grow. Now, there are times that it would have been easier to stay one location for the rehab, one location for the restaurant. It'd have been a lot easier to manage. But for me, it's like when you have good employees, you want them to get promoted. You want them to grow. And then when you have a good service, at Common Bond, people drive in from all over the city, but they also come from all over the country, all over the world. Mm. And so for me, it's like, if you love our product, let us expand it, because the lines were out the door. We didn't have enough seats. And so now we're in the Heights. We're going to Spring, which is our first big step to the north part of town. We get emails and inquiries on our website. Please come open in Corpus Christi. Please come to Florida. Please come to Dallas. And we're like, man, we could barely keep track of what's going on in Houston from the restaurant perspective. And then from the rehab perspective, The Right Step was a 20-year love project, and it grew throughout Texas. And when I sold, it was a difficult decision. It was a good decision for me at the time, but it was a difficult decision because you're basically allowing your employees to go work for someone else. And the private equity-backed group, they did some really good things, but they also did some poor things. And it affected the employees. And at the 5th year, they basically went Chapter 11, and I was the landlord. And so, and I was able to take back some of the facilities. A lot of the great staff came aboard with me. And so now we're basically replicating what we did the first time with a new and more exciting curriculum, which is called Positive Recovery Centers. Positive Recovery, which is the curriculum. And that's a great story. Back in the Right Step days, we'd have all employees read one book a year. I would pick a book. One year was Who Moved My Cheese. The next year, one of them was Delivering Happiness. And the Delivering Happiness, as you know, is about positive psychology. And Dr. Seligman at the University of Penn and our physician of all people, all employees had to write a report on it. But he, in his report, took it to a whole nother level. He actually researched University of Penn and then signed up for their master's program. So not only was he a medical doctor, he went and get a master's degree in positive psychology. And so when we restarted our addiction program, it's like I wanted that curriculum, I wanted that name, and I wanted him to be our chief medical officer, which his name's Jason Powers. That he is, and that's how it's all come together.
That's a great story. I really appreciate you sharing, and it's really amazing to hear your expansion plans and things that are going on. Let's go back a little bit.
Yep.
To the early days, the beginnings. We were talking. You and I chatted a little bit about that. How did George start out? How did you get the entrepreneurial spirit? Where did that come from? And tell us about those early days of what kind of led up to what we're seeing today.
I'm from South Louisiana, but I'm half Lebanese and half Cajun.
Wow.
My grandfather migrated from Lebanon, and he was a merchant. So basically, he sold clothes, he sold things, and I'm not exactly sure the great history about how he ended up in South Louisiana, but he did, and he was peddling merchandise, and then his kids. My dad had clothing stores, my uncle had appliance stores, my uncles had clothing stores, and I think I was probably 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. I'm in the clothing stores, straightening up things, sweeping, cleaning things. I remember the first time I could do a sale was a big deal. I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. I still, in fact, I got to find that. I had a antique cash register back then, those days in the early 70s. And, I started cutting grass. I was in distributive education in high school, which meant you go to school in the morning, you worked in the afternoon. So I always felt like I had a good work spirit. And then, I got mixed up in drugs and alcohol. My dad died when I was 12. I didn't know how to deal with the grief. So I got mixed up in drugs and alcohol. And the blessing was that my entrepreneurial spirit had me selling drugs. And I got caught, which was the best thing that could have ever happened. And it saved my life, actually. It really did, because it's such a dangerous lifestyle. And my lawyer was so wise in saying you needed to go to rehabilitation. And I had no intention to go to rehabilitation, but I did. And while I was in some of my treatment, the counselors actually talked to me and they said, you might want to become a counselor. You have a way to confront people and they don't get defensive. And so I went back upstairs and told the other guys in the program, I said, man, they're really hard up for help. They think I can become a counselor. And look at the kind of cars they drive. I was 19 years old. So what did I know? And then, when God has a calling for you, it just happens. And so I ended up going get trained to be a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Was recruited to Texas in 1987 and just have never left. I love Houston. I love the people, the diversity. And, I got the Right Step because it was basically a bankrupt company. And they came to me and said, hey, we can give you 25% of the company and a small salary, but we're about to go bankrupt. And I'm like, whoa, that sounds very appealing. But I came aboard and turned it around and bought the people out and just grew the business. And I just love helping people. I love seeing people smile. I love people having good service. So that's been my passion.
And I think you hit on some of the things that we see commonly, as an entrepreneur myself, is I think, I also like your advice or thought on this is, do you think having a maybe addictive personality or let's call it compulsive personality, is that pretty much par for being an entrepreneur? And also a thing I want to point out is, did those early feelings like loss of your father, spur you to become an entrepreneur, really empower you?
I don't know if that spurred me, but obviously it spurred my addiction, which spurred me to get help, which spurred me to want to help more people. So that part, yes. And I do think entrepreneurs are usually type A, risk takers, want things to be better, always willing to take risk. And sometimes that causes collateral damage. I mean, I've had divorces because of, I think, business getting in the way of the relationship with the wife and thinking that, what's first, the business or the wife or the business. Sometimes that's very confusing when you're worried about payroll or, you got to do things that, it takes 12 hours versus being home at, 8 hours. So I think there's some negativity to entrepreneurship, but with the right guidance, support, leadership, you learn to have balance and have the right culture. And so that's what I'm proud of. And being a member of Entrepreneurs Organization has definitely helped.
Yeah, that was one of the things that enlightened me and really helped my life out is, seeing and sharing with other people. And I think the challenge is, as you pointed out, is that work-life balance is very challenging because we do pour our heart and soul out to the people in our organization, as you pointed out. And then we have to, what do we have for the tank when we go home? And I think when we're younger, we think we can do both. And as you know, it may not always be the truth. What's a golden nugget? I always like to ask my CEOs, my entrepreneurs, what is the golden nugget? If they want to share something out there with the audience out there, the Heart of the Hustle audience, what would you say? Hey, this is some gold for you.
I think it's the two things that have been persistent that I learned early on that always rings true is to make sure you invest enough in human resource, a human resource leader that's compassionate but accountable, holds the employees accountable, and technology. Technology continues to change and continues to improve. However, when people sell you technology, if they don't sell you good training, you may use 2 or 3% of what it's capable of. And that's the biggest frustration as an owner is like, we want new technology and employees want it too, but if you don't use the full capacity of it, I think you're cheating yourself. So I don't know if that's a good golden nuggets, but those are the two things that have persisted in my life that when I invest in those two areas, life gets easier.
Well, that's very good. And I agree with you. I think there's human resources and being involved in your people. I mean, you definitely demonstrate that as being an admired CEO. Yeah. And I think as well as technology, as an entrepreneur myself, technology, we're all kind of technology geeks. We always want to see the best and the better. Well, I think that will kind of come to the end today. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you making the time and coming over here to St. Thomas. And George, I'll tell you, you really, through your bistros and especially through Positive Recovery, you make a real huge impact here in the city of Houston. We all owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.